Welcome to Hashknife Hangouts. I'm Calen Carpenter. With me is my partner, co-host, and father, Brandon. Before we get started, for those of you on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe. Facebook, like, comment, share. Find us on InstaG at hashknife.ranch.mt, all lowercase. And also, if you're interested, get my consciousness or stream of thoughts on Twitter at HashKnifeKid. Now, on to the opening notes.
Tourette's.
Yeah.
Organized Tourette's.
So if you don't know, this is one of probably the next 8 or 9 episodes that will be in a hotel room. That's why I have a virtual background. Today, we're going to be discussing the executive order that President Biden signed this past week. And I've got a lot of opening notes. So, Dad, if you've got a pen and paper, have them handy so you can write down your comments because I'm just going to go through this real quick. Again, there's a lot to go through. So with regards to meatpacking and President Biden's latest executive order, and what was that order? It was to the promotion of competition. Much of it was to tech and stuff like that, but there was some agriculture stuff as well. I'll begin with the fact that I'm wholly unsupportive of executive orders. These items have frankly been taken advantage of by both parties and have gone far from what the executive order was intended back in the nation's founding. This needs to be legislation, not a pen stroke of an individual leader. But moving on, Ag Daily Report had something, and then the White House fact sheet had some information, which I will lay out exactly what was in the July 9th executive order. So starting first with Ag Daily, you can find it at agdaily.com. It's under executive order promotes competition agriculture. That's kind of the headline. The executive order addresses 4 things. 1, Packers and Stockyards Act. The USDA is directed to consider issuing new rules to assistant farmers in reducing exploitation and anti-retaliation protections when speaking against bad practices. That was mostly focused towards those who raise and produce chickens and poultry. Number 2, the product of USA labels. We've talked about this before in the shoot with Cool and stuff like that. USDA is directed to, again, consider only issues, rules to define the product of USA labels. So there's more to that. We can get into it, but that's where it's at. Number 3, increase access to markets. The USDA is directed to develop a plan. So they've been directed to simply develop a plan, not actually action anything, but develop a plan to increase opportunities for fair return. Focus mostly on food distribution systems such as like farmers markets and stuff like that. How I see that and how I interpret that, and I could be wrong, is essentially not utilizing the normal feedlot to butcher and processing plant system. It's using the local infrastructure that is already in place and expanding on that. That's how I see it. The right to repair. This is a big one for mostly farmers, but it does apply to us as well. The order, again, doesn't say you have to. It encourages the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, to limit equipment manufacturers from restricting do-it-yourself repairs. This goes directly to manufacturers such as John Deere. Again, we can go into that. Some of the comments that came off of that. RCAF, so R and then calf is in like a baby cow. RCAF USA CEO said, in quotes, if these rules are brought to fruition, there's the big part right there. If they are brought to fruition, they will go a long way toward rebalancing the disparate market power between the highly concentrated beef packers and the widely disaggregated independent cattle feeders, backgrounders, stockers, and cow-calf producers. Okay. The USCA president, Brooke Miller, said, the USCA applauds President Biden for hearing the calls from cattle country regarding increased consolidation in the U.S. cattle industry, and then issuing his own call for prompt action within his administration. Miller also continued, a centralized food system is a threat to our national security. I do agree with that. USCA believes in pushing forth policy solutions that strengthen the bottom lines of U.S. agriculture producers in order to strengthen our nation's food security. Food security is going to be a big thing. I'm telling you, in the next 100 years, it is going to be a big thing. It might even be a big thing in the next 2 decades,
10,
folks. I'm not
10
kidding.
years. Yeah.
President Biden's executive order is an important step towards restoring a fair and equitable food system. All right. A lot of this is quotes right now from coming straight from Ag Daily. I'll get to the last one. And here was the quote. One person who disagreed, North American Meat Institute president and CEO Julie Anna Potts, said in quotes from Ms. Potts, President Biden's executive order calling for USDA to change the packers and stockyards rules will have unintended consequences for consumers and producers. Government intervention in the market will increase the cost of food for consumers at a time when they are still suffering from the economic consequences of the pandemic. Now, to you, ma'am, I do disagree. That is not because of the producers. That is wholeheartedly because of the packers. There has been no issue, no reason why those prices have increased 400 to 600 times the cost that they should. That lies not with.
Yeah. Those were all pre-pandemic that happened too. So they're using this COVID pandemic bullshit as a reason for, oh, it never happened before that. And that's absolutely false.
Yes. Now, I understand where she's coming from, 100%. But that is not because of the producers. That is because of the middlemen who put the food on the table in the processing plants. Now, to the other source, the White House fact sheet. You can find it at www.whitehouse.gov. In the briefing room section under statements released, and then it talks about the fact sheet the fact sheet executive order on promoting competition in American economy. Essentially, we can find it. I kind of laid out the whole URL there for you. There's other stuff, but if you Google that, you should find it. Here's the information that the fact sheet says. There's 72 initiatives that came through this executive order. This is one of the reasons why I'm so against executive orders. So much stuff gets rolled in by one person. I just disagree with it. But that's more of a political thing. But I will tell you, I think that's both. While that may be helpful now, we're looking short term. I don't think that's helpful long term. But anyway, from those 72 initiatives. We are focusing on agriculture specifically. So that's just agriculture, folks. 72 initiatives were placed in that executive order for agriculture. Now there's also tech, there was labor, here it is. There was stuff for antitrust enforcement focused on labor, agriculture, healthcare, and tech markets. So 4 big things. So agriculture had 72 initiatives. And frankly, agriculture tends to be an afterthought. So if 72 of those were with agriculture, I'm sure there was a whole lot more with the others. Empowerment of the family farmers and increase their incomes by strengthening the Department of Agriculture's tools to stop the abusive practices of some meat processors. Okay. What are those tools? What do they do? And how are those supposed to help? I've already outlined the 4 that I talked about, and I'll scroll up real quick, talk about those. Consider issuing new rules with exploitation and anti-retaliation, product of USA labels, increase access to markets, and right to repair. Those are really the 4 big ones. So that's where, what other tools do you have? All right. Now here's a quote, and I'm just going to lay it out there. This is directly from the fact sheet. Now, I will say this before I go into this. You're going to hear things that say things like, this act was systematically weakened by the Trump administration during its reign. And there was another thing as well. Listen, I'm not going to agree or disagree with that statement. But my point is, there's another
Every
one as
administration blames the previous administration, whether it's true or not.
Yes, but
that's politics.
Here's my issue with this. This is a fact sheet coming from the White House at 1600.
That's an oxymoron. That's an oxymoron.
But my point being is, as a fact sheet, you should not be saying things such as, in quotes, systematically weakened by the Trump administration.
Right.
That's an opinion. You need to be providing a lot of facts if that's true.
Right.
You
They
are
should stand
providing
on
a
their own.
fact sheet. It should only say, this is what this says, this is what it's doing. There is a second one in here, and I can't find it real quick off the top of my head. We'll get there. I'm sorry. But like, that's the issue I do have with this specific fact sheet. But anyway, I'll go into it. So in quotes, over the past few decades, key agricultural markets have become more concentrated and less competitive. For example, just 4 companies control most of the world's seeds, and corn seed prices have gone up as much as 30% annually. Consolidation also limits farmers and ranchers' options for selling their products. That means they get less when they sell their produce and meat, even as prices rise in the grocery store. Truth. For example, 4 large meatpacking companies dominate over 80% of the beef market, and over the last 5 years, farmers' share of the price of beef has dropped by more than a quarter, from 51.5% to 37.3%. All truth. While the price of beef has risen, and you could answer in parentheses, in the grocery store.
And by how much? What percentage has that gone?
Yeah, that doesn't say in here, but we know it's 4 to 600
There's a reason
times.
why.
Overall, farmers and ranchers share each dollar spent on food each share of dollar spent on food has been declining for decades. Yes. In short, family farmers and ranchers are getting less, consumers are paying more, and the big conglomerates in the middle are taking the difference. Yes. Meanwhile, the law designed to combat these abuses, the Packers and Stockyards Act, was systematically weakened by the Trump administration Department of Agriculture. That's where I have an issue with it. American farmers and ranchers are also getting squeezed by foreign corporations importing meat from overseas with labels that mislead consumers and customers about their origin. Yes. True. Cool.
We talked about that. Country of origin labeling.
Yes. Under current labeling rules, meat can be labeled, quote, product of USA, end quote, if it is only processed here, and again, in parentheses, the United States. Yes, that is true. Including when meat is raised overseas and then merely processed into cuts of meat here, again, in parentheses, the United States. Yes, this is true. For example, most grass-fed beef labeled, quote, product of USA is actually imported. Yes. What makes it hard or impossible for consumers to know where their food comes from and to choose to support American farmers and ranchers? Yes. This is also why I 100% support buying local. Continuing, last paragraph. Corporate consolidation even affects farmers' abilities to repair their own equipment or to use independent repair shops. Powerful equipment manufacturers such as tractor manufacturers, John Deere, Case, International, have proprietary repair tools, software, and diagnostics to prevent third parties from performing repairs. For example, when certain tractors detect a failure, they cease to operate until a dealer unlocks them. That forces farmers to pay dealer rates for repairs that they could have made themselves or that our independent repair shop could have done more cheaply. Yes, and that is a very good point. That costs a lot, and you can knock out a lot of overhead and operating finances through that.
Not only that, but when you can detect what that issue is, and if it's not a issue that will threaten, the health of the engine or hydraulics or whatever it is, that it's just like a faulty sensor, for instance,
right?
And everything else is working. There is no mechanism by which you can bypass that sensor to keep going until you can go get it repaired.
Right.
Can't even do that. Can't even bypass it.
Well, and then the rest of it goes on to lay out the 4 things that I already explained. So, I mean, it is what it is. It's disappointing because the executive order stated that the USDA should consider and should develop a plan and all these things, but it doesn't actually say that they have to do anything, which is very upsetting. I think, and this is going to a conversation that you and I had yesterday, a gentleman, I think it was Texas or Oklahoma, he was stating, and maybe I can try and I'll see if I can throw it in the description below. That individual talked about how the same thing that was laid out. You're paying more at the grocery store, and we're getting paid less at the ring when we sell our cattle for market. And the guys in the middle are taking all the profit, and we're both ends of the system are getting messed up. We only have, what that man said was, we only have Congress's attention for now. This is an issue that's been going on for 2 weeks. Surprisingly enough, we've had it for 2 weeks. I don't foresee us having it for much longer, because the way our society is set is we have that clicker attention span of, or that thumb thread attention span of, it's not interesting for me for all of 5 seconds, so I'm moving on. It's interesting to people now because the finances that they've been squeezed to because of COVID, but I don't know how long it's going to last. And when it doesn't stick around and nothing happens, that's when we're going to have to really get worried, because we have everybody's attention now. It's going to be after that that's going to be really the issue. So again, I'm glad we've got the attention. I'm glad that there is is something going on with this. I think it needs to be in legislation. And also, I wish there was more enforcement rather than saying, let's see what we can do. You know, there's a whole lot of hand waving and not a lot of actual bite to the bark. So I guess with that long one, and I don't know how long we're into this because I didn't check the clock when I did it and I forgot to start my stopwatch, but hey, we're at where we're at. I'll hand it over to you, Dad.
Well, sorry, I couldn't help but just bust in there on a couple times because it's like, you know.
Yeah.
Two things. You're learning to think like a lawyer, and that is should consider. Okay, what does that mean? And you're absolutely spot on. Should consider doesn't mean you have to. Well, it should doesn't mean it either. Back in my former life, when a law said that you should or you shall, that was a difference between me taking somebody to jail, or it's like, well, it just says you should. Doesn't say it's mandatory. Doesn't say you have to.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
Yeah.
Good for you. Found the loophole. I don't care. You know, so when you should do something, there is absolutely nothing to compel you. And when you consider something, it's just like, yeah, no, okay, and keep going.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I
It's
see is
meaningless.
the USDA is going to look at this and go, okay, we'll consider it. And they'll make a white paper, or they'll have a small investigation at most for each individual item. And they'll have a team of 10 people that maybe go around and they do their thing, do their findings, and then they present it to the USDA chief. And then he or she is going to look at it and go, okay, thanks. We considered it. Thank you. And that's it. And,
do you know
and they'll
what,
develop a plan, and they won't action it also. That's the thing, is it just said to develop the plan, not to follow it through.
What plan? How big a plan? How detailed a plan? What does it actually do?
Right.
It can be zero and say, oh, we think that we shouldn't do this currently, but doesn't have any outline about what you should do to fix it or a way to change anything along with it. Just says, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. So that whole thing, and I am completely in agreement with you about not having executive orders. An executive order should be for some kind of an emergency.
Yeah,
National
I would agree
security.
with that. Like a governor's directive, for example. And we'll probably talk about this next week, but Governor Gianforte, the governor of Montana, did essentially a declaration of emergency for drought for the state of Montana. And that's supposed to allow more grazing opportunities for places where we normally wouldn't graze. That's what I see executive orders being, is stuff like that. More for safety and immediate action versus this is really, again, 72 directives just for agriculture out of 4 significant topics that were addressed. That's a lot. That's legislation. That's not executive order. That's in my opinion. Now, people can disagree with me all they want, but I'll be happy to sit at a bar with a beer and we can have that discussion. But that's not an executive order. That's legislation.
Okay, here's my cynical take on it, and that is when the president signs a executive order and everything is should consider or develop, or nothing hard and fast. What that is a dog whistle.
Yeah,
And that
let's
dog
look at the
whistle,
verbs real quick. It was 2 considers, 1 develop, and the fourth one was encourage. Encourage
yeah,
the FTC
encourage.
to limit restricting DIY.
So what does that plan of action immediately put in place?
Nothing. Uh,
Yes, it does. Absolutely does. Absolutely put something in place.
if you're talking about anything of substance, that's what I my entire life is based off of substance. That has no substance to it whatsoever. That's what I'm saying is there's a lot
Absolutely, it
of
has
bark and no.
substance.
Okay,
It
what's the
has a
substance?
ton of substance. When you've got a lobbyist that all of a sudden goes, okay, we need to open up the vault and we're going to be spending some money on going to the USDA and saying, hey, I'm with the Meatpacking Association or from Miss with Potts,
Yeah,
her
she was
group,
for
meat industry,
the no, she was USCA,
or USC, okay, and
Cattlemen's
says,
Association. Yeah,
yeah, and say, oh, you know what? This whole thing's a bad idea. We need you to, look at what's really going on. I know you just guys are going to consider this and you're going to develop a plan
oh,
and
you're
you're going to
right. I'm
encourage.
sorry. Yeah, yep. You she no, Miss Miller was
Miller.
USCA. Miss Potts, the one you're talking about that was against it because of unintended consequences, is the president and CEO of North American Meat Institute, which
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
I'm not
I was
sure what they actually here. I got Google while you're talking. I'll look them up.
well, okay, and here's the problem. Just because it has a good name that sounds good doesn't mean that's what they stand for. Unfortunately, it's all about messaging, not what the message is, but messaging. So you've got a president who's
There it
given
is.
a
All right.
directive.
North American Meat Institute is a nonprofit industry trade association formed in 2015, so right after the highest highs that we've had for a while, and then it immediately crashed. From the merger of the American Meat Institute and the North American Meat Association. It's headquartered in metropolitan Washington, D.C. It is the oldest and largest trade association representing U.S. packers and processors of beef, pork, lamb, veal, and turkey. So her entire, yeah, I know exactly where she's coming from. She doesn't want that to impact her
They're
industry
lobbyists.
because they're making tons of money. Yeah.
They are lobbyists. I'm telling you, they're in what they're housed in Washington D.C. and they're in representing the meat industry from the Packer side. They're lobbyists. It's exactly supporting my
Yeah.
point that now we're going to have a flurry of money being thrown at some people, and nothing's going to happen. But some folks are going to add to their bank accounts that are already on the take. I mean, that's my cynical side of it. Tell
No,
me I'm wrong. Tell me I haven't seen this before.
well, I agree with you. The other thing too is what you're going to end up doing is the guys like us who don't have the money to put into lobbyists to fight on our behalf, we will lose. This is my opinion. People can disagree with it. We will lose because the meat packers are going through the North American Meat Institute, and they can. This is the short term expense for them. They can blow a couple billion with a B, as in Bravo, uh, to support their lobbyists to get their message across and to make sure that the politicians pay, or sorry, not pay, but make sure the politicians vote that the way they want them to. We, as the cattlemen across North America, even if we all throw our stuff together and we're saying, hey, let's do this, let's co-op as a nation and say, nope, we're taking the Packers down. We don't have billion with a B. We might have a couple million, but I guarantee we don't have a billion. And it's going to be really hard to take our little 6-shot single action revolvers to the high noon, showdown when they've got an AK-47 and maybe a Tommy gun shooting at us with 100 rounds a minute.
Couple of saws off to the side.
Yeah, it's not the feasibility of us winning in the politics because of lobbyists is very difficult. That's where I have that issue, because I agree with you. It is cynical, but I think it's based off of the realities that we've seen in the past.
Yeah, and that's the problem. And it isn't that it's never even going to reach the politician level. It's going to reach the bureaucrat level, who will develop, and bureaucrats are safe. They spend 30, 40 years in the same position or in the same organization moving around, and they are considering and they are encouraging and they are developing, but nothing ever happens because it
Well,
doesn't need to happen, and it'll happen very, very slowly as well.
and I'll also utilize my experience in the military, one of the greatest bureaucracies in the United States. Um, I can consider and I can encourage all day long.
Uh-huh.
All I have to do is I can say that. When it comes to developing a plan, here, if I am completely against you and me, here's my take on it. What I'll probably end up doing is I will develop a plan and I will continue to work at it. And then I'll get a lobbyist that says to my boss, I need you to focus your directions elsewhere. And at that point, it will have been a month or two. So we put in our effort. And my focus and my effort and my energy will go elsewhere. And it's just simple as that. Now, when the president comes back, let's assume the president and his administration say, hey, we told you to develop a plan. Produce that plan. I need it briefed. Okay. That plan is going to be only half finished, or if we're lucky. And all you have to do is you'll dust it off and you'll walk to the White House in a briefcase and you'll say, so, sir, we had to focus our energy elsewhere, but we did follow your directive, which was to develop a plan. This is not a complete plan, but this is what we have proposed. And so here it is. And they'll lay it out. They'll spend an hour explaining everything and whatnot and making it pretty. And then he'll say, oh, that sounds good. And maybe let's be optimistic here. He says, okay, I want you to start actioning it. Okay, that sounds good, sir. So we'll start actioning it. Then the next question is going to be, how are we going to fund it? And then you got to go to Congress, and now you're going to have to go through. And here's where it should have been a legislation to begin with. Yes. Legislation creates the funding. Executive orders do not. So now he can create all these plans that he would like, Mr. President. You can tell people to do anything all they want. When it comes to that new fiscal year, which happens to be October 1st of this year, you're now going to have to get both sides of the aisle to agree on the appropriate budgeting of these directives and these actions. Somewhere along the line, military is going to win out, Social Security is going to win out, Medicare is going to win out, your personal Secret Service protection detail is going to win out. All these things take away from the pot of money. And suddenly, oh, that executive order you created in July, it's no longer a thing. It doesn't work. We don't have the money. Okay, well, we developed a plan. We gave it to you. You told us to action it, but we don't have the money for it. So it's going to have to sit there until the next administration.
And look and that happens every time. And if you've got, because it's the House of Representatives that is appropriating money. That's their job. But
it has to be confirmed.
But it has to be also agreed to by the Senate.
Has to agree. Yep.
Yes, that's correct. However, when you have two parties that are separate, or the House does not agree with the Senate, or the House does not agree, especially with the president, nothing happens. And I don't give it any care who is in what position there, whether it's Democrats, Republicans in the White House or not. They fight each other. Yeah. Meanwhile, they get wealthy with what's the word? Go ahead. Say it with lobbyists? Me. Lobbyists. There you go. Yeah. Meanwhile, that's just the cost of doing business. All that is to a meat packer and a lobbyist is advertising. And what they're advertising is their brand and why they're important and why this stuff needs to become more and more and more entrenched.
Well, and I'll even, here's where I'll kind of do some analytics politically from the Calen Carpenter's perspective. I'm a simple fella, but I got some thoughts.
Oh my God.
Who at this day and age, it used to be farmers and ranchers were the Democrats.
Well, farmers were Democrats, ranchers were Republicans in our part of the country.
All right, that's fine. I'll agree with that.
Because if you want to take a look at what were the farm subsidies. Yeah. Farmers, the reason why their caps are like yours, which is a big disappointment, is so they get their face in a post office box.
Yeah, no, I get it, but I'm going to tell you, nowadays, you look at 2016 election and you look at the map of the blues in the major cities and the reds in the rural areas of America. Then you look at, so that should show right there, rural areas are predominantly right leaning. I'm not going to say Republican. I will never say
Right.
they're Republican. I'll say they're right
Well,
leaning.
I am not a Republican. I want that to be made very clear.
And there will be
There
a
is
thinking time.
picked up-
I shared something today that
good.
I will share on thinking time that shows something that depicts how both parties are leading us to the same location.
Absolutely. One's just doing it faster than the other.
Yes, exactly. But I'll tell you, based off the 16 election and then stuff I see on social media on a regular basis, I feel very fortunate. I've set up my phone and I've worked the system over the past 2.5 years so that I can have Twitter feed me with information for agriculture and agriculture specific, so I can be somewhat informed of what the layman is saying across America and some information that we present on here every week. With that said, I see a lot of comments from people across the United States that are farmers and ranchers, and they are conservative. And so that's what I'm saying is it's gone from, okay, what you said is farmers being left leaning, ranchers being to the right, to most of everybody moving right. Long story short, my point being, this is a Democratic president making these directives. This is good for us right now, at least on the surface. I'll say that. I think on the surface it's good. You know, if you say optimistically that all this will follow through, I think it's good. It's good for us. This will help.
It's a delay for an even longer term fix. It's a delay.
Yes, I agree with that. However, it's a step forward. But with that said, we're getting this from a Democratic president, so everybody's like, hey, you know what? We got to say, you know, he's at least getting us in the direction that we're pushing the giant, I don't know, the gravity that is the government. We're pushing it in the direction that we need it to start going to help us out a little bit and get rid of the Packers. You got to start somewhere.
We need Packers.
We do, Packers, but not to the extent that they're doing it right now.
Not in the manner in which it's being carried out.
Yes, and there's something that you and I think need to do a hangouts on how we can fix that at a local level, and I think all of us can do that across the nation. It just takes some people with some grit and some determination, and we can make it happen. But moving on, my point being, this is all done by a Democratic president who tends to be fiscally conservative when it comes to budgeting. It's not Democrats. Never have I ever seen a Democrat say anything to a spending bill because of the number behind it.
No, they will always want more.
And Republicans are normally saying no because of the things that are involved with it. There's policies and stuff that have been pork rolled and they disagree with it. My point again is we're getting a Democratic president that's saying, let's do these things. Let's help the agriculture community out. Let's do all that. The people that we have to worry about trying to actually get the money from and trying to support us is our own kind. It's the people who are trying to say, hey, we got to check our spending. And they're not wrong. It's the same thing as if I have a wife and I say, hey, let's go have a nice dinner. And she decides to have $150 plate worth of lobster and steak. I'm like, whoa, that's not what I said. Let's have a good time. I was thinking, maybe $50 a plate at a nice steakhouse, and we'll do $100 for the night, not $300 because we just feel like it. There's
how about God, yeah, it would be really nice to do that, but you know what? We just can't afford it right now. Let's see what we're doing maybe next month and have a special night out, and let's limit ourselves to what's realistic.
Yes.
That's the conversation that should happen.
Yes. In Congress, on both chambers of Congress.
Absolutely right. Correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know what? And just because we're going to dinner, that does not mean that we're going to buy your mom a new pair of shoes. And your sister doesn't need any jewelry to go along with this dinner,
and
because they're not going to be there at all. No, don't need that. No. Yeah. And the neighbor down the road, their kids all don't need skateboards. They had skateboards for their last birthdays. Every one of them, I saw that. They don't need upgrades.
Or better yet, hey, let's not get your nephew a puppy that we're going to also have to pay all the expenses and vet bills for the rest of its life. because that stuff happens too.
Yeah. So, but that is exactly the point, is like, okay, we need to watch what we're doing. We need to be responsible for it. And we need to quit rolling a bunch of other crap in here that's somebody else's pet peeve. You know, or pet, not a peeve, but a little pet thing to do,
Pet
because
project.
you know
Yeah.
what? I want them to make me or feel good about me being me instead of doing your damn job.
Well, and here's where I didn't spend enough time looking for the 72 directives. I'll take that on as my responsibility. Um,
Nobody would
frankly,
listen to them anyway.
that's the other thing too. Is like, frankly, I don't know who would pay attention to 72 directives. That's a lot just for
That's the
agriculture.
and that is
So,
exactly the problem where we're at.
and going to what you just said, here's also my argument against. I'm against executive orders. Here's also my thing for legislation. Legislation needs to be limited to one page. I'll give you front and back. Legislation, a bill is front and back one page, because the issues that we had, both, only one side was professing it. It was the conservative side in 2009 when they did the Affordable Care Act. Only one side said there's too many pages to read. And then the other side said, oh, yeah, I voted for it, but I didn't read all the pages.
I believe one of the quote from the Speaker of the House at the time is, "You just need to vote for it, and we'll read it, figure out what's in it later."
Yeah, and that's my point. Is
That's
the
ludicrous,
the
irresponsible.
legislation?
That is malfeasance, and it is malpractice.
Hey, anybody can produce a bill to be considered on Congress. So, Mr. President, here's my thing. You had 4 things for the competition in the United States, competition markets for, what was it? It was healthcare, tech, ag, and dang it. Hold on. Stick with me. Oh man, where are they? Oh, is healthcare? Hey, sorry, folks. I got labor. There it is, labor. So
can't leave out labor, because that is that too is a captive market. They're talking labor unions.
Yeah, I know, but those are all 4 significant parts of our industry in the United States. So, we do need to look at that, and we need to make those directives and maybe, help provide some help behind that. But again, how are you going to budget it? That comes from legislation. So going back to my point, one page, front and back. You can make 4 pages, Mr. President or his administration. Here's what we suggest, not an executive order, but a bill for labor, a bill for agriculture, a bill for healthcare, and a bill for what's the 4th one? I just missed.
Big tech.
Big tech. There it is. You put those 4 bills out there. They can all be considered at the same time, but then you force Congress to budget all 4. And now looking at agriculture, okay, how are we going to budget it? How are we going to support it? How are we going to do it? We're just looking down the agriculture tunnel right now. But you take that and you utilize the executive order instead of as an executive order, but rather as 4 separate bills, and you produce them to Congress and say, hey, you have my support. It's got my signature, my tentative signature. Work it out. And when they say, okay, here's our final product, Mr. President, 1 page, front and back on all 4 subjects. Here you go. He looks at it and goes, okay, I accept this. Then he signs it, and then it goes into action. And then if there's issues with it, Supreme Court can rule.
Okay. Way back when I was even younger than you, there was a fella in office that wanted what was called the line item veto, so that he could look at a bill and go, this has absolutely nothing to do with the intent of this bill.
Was that
I can
Reagan?
Scratch. Ronald Reagan wanted the line item veto. He said, I can scratch this particular thing out of this bill without vetoing the rest of it, just that one item.
Yeah.
And the Speaker of the House at the time was another Irishman.
Gingrich?
Nope, named Tip O'Neill.
Oh, okay.
Democrat. And that was fought, and it's still been fought. And of course, I think it's actually been found, the opinion was it'd be unconstitutional, because you can't pick and choose out of a bill individual things by the president.
That makes sense.
And it
I
does make
don't
sense.
necessarily disagree with it, but I don't agree with
Right.
it as well. So
But what
understanding that, I'm
Reagan,
like, okay, I can accept
but
that.
yeah, but what Reagan was trying to do was stop some of this pork belly stuff that was
Right.
going on that was horrendous. And just
Yeah.
exactly the things we're talking about. Now, let's take a look, because this is a very political
Conversation.
conversation we're having. I mean,
I
we try
mean,
to stay away from this, but you know
well,
what?
we stay away from we try to stay away from politics in general, but
Right,
we're okay with talking politics when it involves agriculture specific, which is why I wanted
right.
to talk about it, because this is talking about the executive order that was supposed to assist agriculture. Again, my take is it's a movement in the right direction. I don't think it's a solution. And I don't think this is the end of it. This is simply the beginning, but there's a whole lot more to it than what's just there. And it only encourages, considers, and directs the
That
development
directs
of things, directs the
the
development. It doesn't
development.
actually
Okay,
make
yeah, you're right.
anything happen.
Right.
That's where
Well, and
my
you need
big
okay, look at where things are at. So number one, let's look at big tech. Why is that all of a sudden on the radar of the president through an executive order?
because former President Trump just signed in a lawsuit against, I think it was Google, Twitter, and Facebook as
A
of
class
this week.
action and a class action lawsuit, because a lot of people, not just him, but a lot of people have been censured. So what are they going to try to do? This, to me, this is nothing more again than politics. They're going to try to minimize the damage. So let's move on to healthcare. We've had
Insulin. That's the
Obamacare.
big thing right now. Is everybody says insulin? What's insulin cost? It's like $1,400. I think an application. I'm not
Well,
diabetic. I don't need insulin, but I think it's like $1,400 per injection or something.
yeah,
Like that.
it depends on who and how much. I mean, there's a lot of variables to that, but at any rate, it doesn't matter. It's exorbitant.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. People are
Right.
dying because they can't provide insulin for
Right.
themselves to survive.
So, but not only, I mean, that single issue, that's big pharma, which has been, uh, each side blames the other for big pharma. But you know what? Nothing
Yeah.
changes because they got, guess what? Say it with me. Say it.
Lobbyists.
Lobbyists. There you
Be
go.
careful with healthcare though, because I can go down a whole rabbit hole with this because of my position. So
Absolutely. No,
gloss over
I get
this
it.
one.
I get it. But the point is, what we're looking at is big tech got a lawsuit against it this week. They've been working on healthcare or Obamacare since,
2009.
you're right, 2009. And actually before that, because the Clintons were trying to bring that in.
Yeah. Labor.
You know, prior to George Bush Jr., which I'm no fan of either, never met a spending bill he didn't love. So now then you have big labor. What have they got to do now? He is through again executive order on day one. Our president signed away a couple of big, huge job type union skilled labor industry. I mean, big projects, the XL Keystone Pipeline.
Oh
Well,
yeah.
they are trying now. They're like, oh, we have pissed off big labor.
Oh yeah.
We
there was a lot of people on Twitter. They would said the Dakotas. They said, listen, you know, you may not have liked the pipeline, but it created thousands of jobs.
Yeah.
You just gutted the Dakotas economy, and now
Okay.
you wonder why the governor of South Dakota, Chrissy Noem, is completely against you and doing everything she can to destroy you, because you crippled her economy.
Oh yeah. That's one state. That's not even a border state to Canada. What is Canada going to do with that oil?
They were going to tax it. Tariffs in,
Where's
tariffs
it going
out.
now? It's
They're
going
probably
to
going to take
China.
it for themselves. Oh, okay.
They're going to take it to China.
If I was them, I'd
Whereas they make even more of the religion of politics for climate change and burning fossil fuels. Yeah, China's real good about that. You know, the US is, you know, our own climate Nazis.
I mean, we've recognized that since
we're the big
08
bad
Beijing
people.
Olympics.
We're better than everybody. We're the best ones in the world at it. So
yeah.
So now they're protecting big tech, they're protecting union laborers, they're protecting the healthcare. What are they really doing with ag? Are they protecting ag?
So, and here's the one thing I can't say. This is ag specific channel. I only looked at agriculture. I didn't compare it to the other three. The executive order was supposed to assist in creating competition, so taking away conglomerates within those 4 regions. Got it.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a trust busting thing.
But
But
I
that always
don't.
sells well. That's
Right.
messaging, not message.
But
That's
the
the
problem
message.
is I can't compare ag to the other 3 because I'm just not well enough informed to speak on that in a public setting like this. So I couldn't tell you. Is it the same? Is it different? Is it similar? I hope it's the same. I hope it's similar. I hope it's in the right direction. But my feeling, my point being earlier, I think I said it right at the beginning. Ag tends to be an afterthought.
It always is. Yeah.
And so my guess would be in this order, because President Biden is a successor of President Obama, he probably put healthcare number 1, tech number 2. This is priority, if anybody's asking. Healthcare 1 because of affordable care. Tech 2 because of the political things that have been going on, and let's face it, over the past 20 years, tech has boomed, especially when it comes to the internet. 3, labor, because he's a diehard Democrat. He's always been unions and labor's and stuff like that. And then because I said agriculture tends to be an afterthought, priority number 4. And so that's where I would guess his intentions were. I don't know. I'm not in the administration. I can't tell you, but that's what I would assume.
I think that's fair. There's a couple others there that are left out because they can't do anything about them, and that is because they're too hot. They're way too hot to touch them, and frankly, it's unconstitutional. I'm not so sure that the executive orders are all like constitutional anyway, because they should be passed by Congress.
The way they're used now,
industry.
yes. The way they were intended, no. And I should look
Correct.
up more information on how they were intended, but I know, reading what I've read on the founding of our nation and on George Washington specifically,
Right.
this is not how, starting back in Reagan Carter days, this is not how executive orders were ever intended.
No, that's right. That's exactly. And you made that point very clear to begin with. But if you've got a tool, you're going to use it. A hammer, you use it to hammer things in. Pretty soon, the next thing you know, you're using the handle of a screwdriver to pound something in, or the head end of a crescent wrench to pound something in. You're going to use whatever you can to get what you want done. And that's what's gone on.
Yeah.
So I kind of think that we beat this to death.
Yeah.
And once again, we can't pay you very much, but we can thank you till you're better paid.